We need to keep the main thing the main thing. We have to make sure that our focus is laser locked on the most important thing, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Back in 2006, Starbucks was struggling as a brand. Their numbers were sagging, and so their CEO and their CFO got together and they had to do something pretty drastic. And so what they decided to do was they were gonna close the stores, every store, for just a few hours one day, and they did that. They brought in all of the employees. They said, we need to retrain ourselves because we have lost our focus. They said the pre-ground coffee and the espresso machine had kind of made them lazy, and they weren't producing the quality that they were once producing. So they called everybody in, they retrained everybody, and guess what? The numbers started to go back up, and everybody was refocused on the main thing. Today, as followers of Christ and as a church, I want to draw us back in and say, wait a minute. We got to go back to the basics. You don't graduate from the gospel. The gospel comes to you, and that's where you meet and encounter Jesus, and then it changes you from the inside out. Day after day, you keep coming back to the main thing, and keep coming back to the main thing, and you keep coming back to the main thing. I mean, I'll tell you what, as a pastor, I am constantly told what the main thing should be other than the gospel. And we have a responsibility to keep our minds and our hearts focused on the good news of hope in Christ, no matter what's going on around us. That's what Paul said to Timothy. He's like, even though your church is divided, even though there's division among you, you have to be careful. You have to flee the evil desires of youth. We're going to come back to that. And to pursue righteousness. And the only way you can pursue righteousness is to have a right relationship with Christ. And you do that by responding to the gospel in faith. And then you genuinely have love for other people. You want their best, and it brings you peace with God and peace with everybody else, along with all the people who call on the name of the Lord out of a pure heart. Everyone who has decided to become a follower of Christ. This is the main thing. Don't chase after the desires of youth. Now, when you read that, you're like, well, youth, that's clearly like children and teenagers, right? In our culture, we've got a lot of different sections of our ages, right? We can divide ourselves in many different ways. In Paul's day, there wasn't like teens and preteens and tweeners and Gen X and Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all that. None of that existed. It was just youth and old people. Like, that's all there was. And so experts will tell you that Timothy, the younger apprentice who this letter is to, that guy was in his 30s or 40s. And Paul says, flee the desires of youth. That made me feel better this week. Like, oh, yeah, I'm young. That's right. He says, flee those things. Don't chase after the secondary things as though they are primary. And listen, there are a lot of important issues, and there is a place to talk about them. But we have to start with keeping the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is the gospel. Because the gospel is a part of a narrative of God's story that intersects with your story. That you were created to be connected to God. But that sin has disconnected you because you inherited the tendency to sin when you were born because of the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. But you've acted on it and you've rebelled against God's way and his best. We've all done it. So we were created to be connected with God. But sin has disconnected us from God. And yet God in his love has offered us a way to be reconnected. Enter the gospel. Through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And when you choose to be reconnected by faith, to make Jesus the forgiver of your sin and the leader of your life, you are transformed. Your eternal destiny is changed. That is the gospel. And the gospel is the main thing that we have to keep the main thing. And all parts of our life that we live out in the culture and in the job and in the family, all of those areas come out of that. Listen, I have heard Christians recently tell me this. They said, man, I kind of feel like I have more in common with the people in my political party than I do at church. You're wrong. If you're a follower of Christ, you're wrong. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you have eternally more connection with other followers of Jesus Christ than you will ever find anywhere else. It used to be, and I've heard it pop recently in some sections of the political pundits, some people will say, listen, what politically unites us is far greater than anything that could divide us. That is wrong. Because if we're not united on the gospel of Jesus Christ, then what divides us is eternally greater than anything that could unite us. Are you keeping the main thing the main thing?